Good morning, everybody. It's good to see you. My name is Tim Harris. I'm pastor at Woodburn Baptist Church. It's 10 o'clock. It is Tuesday. It means it's time for 10 with Tim. Each day, Monday through Friday, as most of you know, we take 10 minutes, give or take a few minutes, and we go verse by verse through the Word of God. We're in the book of Genesis right now, getting close to the end. Chapter 41, verses 1 to 36 today. It's the big day for Joseph. Finally, things turn around for him. Something happens today. Verse 1 begins, it says 2 full years later. It's 2 years after Joseph interprets the dreams of the cupbearer and the baker of Pharaoh, interprets those dreams, and then the cupbearer goes on back to Pharaoh's palace and forgets him. I mean, Joseph had said, remember me, hey, mention me, put in a good word for me. And 2 full years later, nothing happens. It's been 13 years really, but 13 years since Joseph was sold into slavery. What are you supposed to do? What's he been doing? What has Joseph been doing in the pokey for 2 years? Since then, can you just imagine? I have been involved in prison ministry before, and I know how desperate men can be for any kind of word from anything outside, because you don't know what's happening in the world. You don't know what's happening out there with your family. You don't know if people still think about you, if people still love you. You don't know. And so Joseph has had no idea about the cupbearer, but eventually he probably caught on to the fact that guy forgot about him. He just forgot. And it's depressing. It's infuriating. Most of us will never know just that hopelessness and that desperation that are known by guys who are imprisoned. And Joseph has been in prison now for 13 years. What are you supposed to do? The cupbearer's forgotten him, but it probably also seems like at times God has forgotten him. You know, what are you supposed to do in those times of your life when it seems like God has forgotten you, like nothing's happening? Well, I just remind you, in verse 1, 2 full years later, I know the question I begin was, what's Joseph been doing, for 2 years in jail? What happens? But honestly, what Joseph has been doing in jail for 2 years is really not as important as what God has been doing in Joseph for 2 years. That's what matters. Did you get that? It's not what Joseph's been doing in jail. It's what God's been doing in Joseph for 2 years. And Joseph is a changed and a changing man. And we see that in these episodes, in these, places where we get insight. We can see it. I don't know what Joseph knows. I don't know if he's aware of what is happening in him. The ways in which his heart, his character have been absolutely transformed in this, furnace, in this crucible of trials. So what are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to do? When it seems like God's not doing anything, I guess you got two options. You can try to make something happen yourself, or you just wait on God. Now, honestly, in Joseph's story, I see both instincts. I see Joseph do a little bit of both. For example, when he has the opportunity with the cupbearer to say, listen, please, put in a good word for me. Can I give you a copy of if I give you a copy of my resume, would you slide it over to Pharaoh? Is there anything wrong with that? I don't think so. I don't think so. Joseph does what he can to try to make something happen. I guess always praying that God will bless it. Joseph is fully aware that God is in control. In today's passage, even when Joseph is now standing before Pharaoh and interpreting Pharaoh's dreams, Joseph is still careful to remind everybody, listen, this is not in me. This is God. I don't have any wisdom. I don't have anything in me. So I think Joseph is fully aware that he is completely dependent upon God. But at the same time, when he has an opportunity to say to the cupbearer, put in a good word for me, he takes advantage of that. So I do think sometimes when it seems like, nothing's happening, when we wonder what God is doing because we don't see what God is doing, I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to move things along. I think sometimes it's not so much that we're waiting on God. I think sometimes God's waiting on us, So I don't think there's anything wrong with prayerfully, patiently, sometimes doing what we can at the same time recognizing that whatever we do is nothing, compared to what God's going to do. God must be in the doors that we try. God must be in, whatever energy we expend. We're still trusting God. I don't want to do anything that God doesn't have for me. But as I say, I don't want God to be waiting on me. I don't want to miss the opportunity, because I was too lazy or too timid or for whatever, just not able to discern that this door is opening for me. Go through it, So I do think sometimes it will feel like we have to take some initiative, but I remind you, it's all God. It's all God, and we don't always know in the moment whether that instinct, to try the door is coming from our impatience or the Spirit's prompting. I say you try the door. I just do praying, trusting, God, if this isn't the door for me, don't let it open. But, I'm going to try it just the same. I think that's okay. Joseph does that. When he has the opportunity, he tries to make something happen. He's trusting God there. But make no mistake, most of the time, there's nothing for him. He's in jail. Yeah. You don't get a cupbearer coming through, but, like once every 13 years, and he takes advantage of that opportunity. But most days, it's the same old bread and water. He's in jail. So he waits on the Lord, and I don't know what goes through his head, But in chapter 41, it all changes. Pharaoh has dreams. Well, we happen to know somebody, who's the dream master, the dream lord. That's what his brothers called him, right? And it's interesting how what God is doing in Joseph. God's whole purpose for Joseph, it was in him from the beginning. Now he was that snot-nosed, punk whose gifts for dreams were really, really raw and really undeveloped, because he had this amazing ability with dreams, but it wasn't matched with character to support his giftedness. Now, I could preach a whole sermon there, for young people going into ministry, young people wanting to serve the Lord, and they have gifts, but they're not ready yet. They're not ready for the platform. They're not ready for the spotlight because they don't have a character to match their gifts. And that was Joseph early on. There are basically 3 episodes where Joseph, deals with dreams. And as you move through those episodes, you can see how Joseph is growing. With his own dreams, where the story begins, his dreams, his giftedness was just a source of his own pride, a source of arrogance, and I guess we'd say a source of annoyance for everybody else. In the second episode, it was the dreams of the cupbearer and the baker. We can see this growing humility in Joseph in that episode with the cupbearer and the baker, and we can see that his gifts are no longer just, something to use to elevate himself, something he can use, just to shine the light of himself. Now you can see in that middle phase where Joseph is able to use his gifts to help others, but on a very small scale, just helping others, the ones in his path. But now standing before Pharaoh, you can see a very different man, and his gift is still extraordinary, but he has the character. And he has the confidence, and he has the spiritual maturity to stand before Pharaoh and not just, interpret dreams, but to shine the light upon God and be this source of wisdom, not a source of annoyance and not just a source of help, but this source of wisdom. Not only that, but this source of help. He's going to change the world, in ways he can hardly imagine. So do you see that? The gift was in him from the beginning, but it had to be matched with maturity and with character. And so as I say, what God's been doing in Joseph in these years where it looked like he wasn't doing anything for Joseph, don't ever overlook that. When it seems like God's not doing anything, don't believe it. Because what God does in you is much, much more important sometimes than what he does for you. And never forget, God always prepares you where you are for what comes next. And you don't know what comes next, so be faithful where you are. And this is part of the wisdom that Joseph gives to Pharaoh. Now, Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dreams. There are 2. Notice how in the story of Joseph, the dreams always come in 2s. Joseph interprets the dreams, and at the same time, he has this entire revelation, this plan, this word of wisdom for not only what the dreams mean, but for the wise preparation that should take place in order to be a good steward of the future that God has revealed. And that's sort of where the story ends up. Did I just preach too much and I didn't deal a whole lot with the text, but we'll pick up here tomorrow. Was Joseph nominating himself? When he says, by the way, these 7 years of famine coming, you probably need a guy and, I'm your guy. Is he nominating himself? I don't think so. I think as a kid he would have, but I don't think that's the man he is anymore. But all of the sudden, in a day, after waiting 13 years, in a day, everything changes for Joseph, and now he is stepping into the future that he was created for, and it's awesome. So pick up there with me tomorrow. Genesis chapter 41, verses 37 to 57. Chapter 41, verses 37 to 57. Listen, have a good Tuesday. I love you guys so much. I appreciate that you put up with my long-windedness, I'm so intense. And I crack myself up, but I love you guys. Thank you for being my friends and my partners in the Word of God. I'll see you in the morning, Lord willing, 10 o'clock for 10 with Tim.